just for a moment, I want you to think about someone or a couple people that you look up to. Who's like one or two of your favorite people? Maybe it's someone in your life right now. Maybe it's somebody who was in your life. Maybe it's someone who's no longer here. One or two of your favorite people. And then as they come to mind, I want you to think about why. What about them makes them your favorite? What about them is worth looking up to? What about them are you thankful that you've been influenced by? And now for some participation, I would love for a few of you to share out loud, what's like the quality of this person that you're thinking of that you might appreciate the most? Humility.
The way they give of themselves.
Give of themselves. Compassion.
Genuine.
They're genuine.
Wise.
Well, they're wise. They have wisdom.
Outside the box.
They actually can see outside the box.
Brave.
They're brave.
Consistent.
Consistent.
They have their own unique relationship with God.
Yeah, good. Own unique relationship with God. Maybe one or two more?
Authentic.
They're authentic. Faithfulness to God. Good. So as you think about those, I'm sure as you hear someone else share, then you maybe think of someone else, or you even recognize all of those in this same person, right? Each person is multi-layered, and I'm sure why they're your favorite isn't just because of one thing, but multiple things. Now, as I thought about the favorite people in my life, one of the things that continue to come up is this idea of dependence. It seems like those who are compassionate, those who are giving of themselves, those that are faithful to God, those that are wise, those that are authentic, it seems like no matter where they're at in life, no matter the context they find themselves in, no matter if things are going their way or not, it almost seems like they're dependent on something else in their life. Like the moments that I'm dependent on things oftentimes dictate how I'm doing or how I'm showing up. If I'm dependent more on my income, which it feels like there's weeks and days that I feel more attached to the idea of money than I do less, some things change in me that actually might keep me from giving of myself. If I'm dependent on the approval or the liking of other people, I can tend to be a little bit less authentic sometimes because I want to seek whatever that is. So you see the correlation? That it seems like that all the people who are our favorite, that we most admire, that we feel like it's worth following, that we look up to in some way, that we want to become like, they stay true throughout whatever context they find themselves in, whatever's going on. Like life could be falling apart, and they're not dismissing the idea of loss and grief, yet they still carry this absurd amount of joy. Like things are hard and not going their way, and they recognize that, but yet they still give themselves away to other people in this way that doesn't really make sense. And it seems like they're dependent on something else, not their circumstances, not how that day or week is going, and not even based on the people around them. And for us as Midtown, as we think about these people in our lives, the one who we might be able to model after the most and see all of this in would be Jesus. We actually see someone who over and over and over again stays completely true to self. No matter who he's with, no matter how busy or slow that day is, no matter whether he's waking out of a bed that morning or hanging on a cross. We see someone that is good. And I would imagine would be our favorite person if he is not already your favorite person. Though you're not going to like all the things he says to you. So maybe he won't be your favorite. But if we look at that, it's like he's dependent on something else. And if we look at the story of scriptures, if we look at his life, he over and over again says he is dependent on something else. He actually says, I only do what I see my Father doing. So everything that he does, everything that he says, everything that he goes in and around is because he sees this resembled in God. He actually gets it from someone else. But before he actually steps into healing people, to setting the captives free, to restoring sight to the blind, he actually is baptized. The same thing that we do. He is immersed in water, and the Holy Spirit actually fills him just like us. And over again, he's dependent on something else. So this morning, I think the question for us to reflect on is, what are you dependent on? Like if you think about your last week, in contrast of your favorite people, how are you in relationship to them and who you are right now? And how much is that dependent on something specific? What might you be depending on most in your life right now? And if you're anything like me, you're probably most dependent on the thing that's giving you the most worry and fear right now. The thing that feels like it's actually keeping you from being more authentic and genuine with other people. The thing that could bring about the most stress, the most anxiety. The thing that seems to consume your thoughts and wake you up at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night. The thing that keeps coming up in conversation that you complain about over and over and over again. I would argue that might be a sign of what you're most dependent on. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think at the core of who we are to be dependent on something. We just have to choose what. And it's hard because if we don't choose, we're dependent on something and we're just allowing it to happen to us. And again, like my own life, I choose the things that don't tend to bring the best out of me. And it ebbs and flows from week to week. And so as we're continuing this idea of looking at the distinctives of Midtown, so the unique marks of who we are and who we want to become, because I don't think we ever fully arrive. The second distinctive for us is we talked about being relationally authentic last Sunday. This Sunday is being a people that's spirit dependent. That we're actually saying, yes, there's the reality of life. There's money, there's relationships, there's career, there's happiness, there's pleasures, there's desires. There's all these things. And naturally, we're going to depend on something. But it actually takes a choice and a decision, and then it takes habits and practices to choose what we want to be dependent on. And I would put forth this morning that we're actually supposed to be dependent on God, as we see in Jesus. That God actually offers us life in him when we choose to depend on him. And so I want to reflect on one scripture, and then we're going to try on a practice together led by my spiritual director, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But if we go to the scriptures, we're going to go all the way back to Exodus. And Moses is having this conversation with the Lord. We pick up after this point where, 2 commandments, these things written on the tablets. He had gone up to this mountain and had this whole conversation with God, and things were going pretty well. And as he's coming down, he hears all the people of Israel, all the people he's leading are like chanting and singing and doing these things. And this guy named Joshua walks up to him and is like, oh my gosh, it sounds like we're going to war. And Moses is like, no, we're not going to war. That's people praising a God. And they walk down, and the little time, like the 40 days that Moses had been up meeting with God, the people of Israel who had come out of slavery could not help themselves but to create another God. Like the one thing that God said was like, do not worship other gods above me. Like, don't do this. And 40 days go by, and they're like, we don't know where our leader is. We don't know where God is. Let's melt all of our gold and build this golden calf and worship it. So coming off of that, he's having this conversation with God. And he says, you've been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. See, there's this defining moment for Moses. He's a leader. He has a whole nation of people that he's leading and they're following and he's trying to figure out what to do with, and they kind of do all right for a little bit and then they fail again. They kind of do all right. They've seen God move powerfully. He literally parts the oceans for them to walk through to escape slavery, like so many things, yet they keep forgetting who God is and what to do. And he goes back to him. He's like, hey, I got all the things. Like, so if you think about your own life right now, the things that might be going well, the things that might not be going well, the things that you depend on, have you paused and said this? Have you paused and said, you've been telling me, stay there, Kelly, you've been telling me to lead these people, but you have not let me know who you will send with me. You said, I know you by name and have found favor with you. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. What he's doing is he's shifting the dependence here. He's actually saying, God, all these things that you have me doing, all the things that you're calling me to, this whole promised land idea that you're trying to send us to, over and over again, you keep telling me what to do, but where are you? Can I depend on you? Can you go with me? Because I want to do all these things. And then he continues here. And God says to him, the Lord replied, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So God actually says yes. But Moses is claiming, I don't want to go at this alone. And God says, yes. And because you have my presence, that will bring you peace. See, it's not that the circumstance is going right. It's not that it's having it all figured out. It's not that the people you're with are doing the things that you want them to. But it's actually the fact that God is saying, I will be with you. And in that you find peace. And as we look throughout the scriptures, it's in that you will find joy. It's in that you will find identity. It's in that you'll find the truest, deepest desires and pleasures that you have in your heart and your soul. He says, I will go with you. And I will give you rest. And then it continues. That Moses said, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you're pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? If you think about your favorite person, that person that stands out, that person that seems to have these attributes no matter the circumstance, that has these things inside of them that you desire and you see as good, as you look at them, it seems like no matter what's going on, they depend on something else. They could be in financial ruin, yet they are still stable. Their relationships could be falling apart around them, yet they still work to serve other people and actually see outside the box of the circumstance they find themselves in. See, they're actually, it seems like what they're saying is this: if your presence does not go with us, then do not send me. Do not send me the things that I think you're calling me to. Do not send me to the success of this promised land. Do not actually give me all these things. God, if your presence is not with me, because I don't want to attain all the things that I think I desire and not actually see you. Have you paused recently to say that? Man, I want to parent my kids well, but God, what good is it to parent my kids well if your presence is not with me? Man, I want to do well in my career, I do, but God, I want people to actually see something different in me if success is coming. Man, I want to have good, whole relationships, but what is it worth, God, if you're not actually showing up in and amidst my life with them? God, I want to actually see reconciliation in my neighborhood, but what good is that if it doesn't actually point to the reconciliation that you offer? God, what is it to have all these things, but not you actually with us? Have you paused and said, God, I want to depend on you. Help me. There's many things I can depend on. And so what I want to do this morning is give us an opportunity to practice what this could look like. See, there's 1,000 ways that we could shift our priorities, that we could shift the ways that we depend on things. There's a lot of options. There's a gentleman by the name of St. Ignatius of Loyola, and he started the order of the Jesuits. You may be familiar with that, you might not. But for about 1,000 years, they have been a people who their main thing is to be contemplatives in action. So they actually say this idea of spending time with God, being with God, hearing from God, leads me to the actions that I take. It's not just for me to keep. I also don't just take a bunch of actions without it. And another one they say is that they want to see God in everything. And I think that piece right there can oftentimes be the thing that keeps us from actually depending on God. Is that we think that God only looks like when we're in this room raising our hands, singing songs together. That we think God only looks like tearfully praying through the scriptures and having some new revelation each morning. That we think it only comes from good morality based on the culture that we find ourselves in and what other people think is good. That we think it has to do with doing more for God, and then I will see more of him, then I will depend on him, when actually it looks more like noticing where God already is in your life and the lives around you. To actually be people that contemplate, to be people that pause, to be people that listen. And St. Ignatius of Loyola would say that if you were to keep one practice, one thing, one discipline, one rhythm, scripture reading, prayer, serving people, whatever it is, if you were to keep one thing, may it be the daily examine. May it actually be that each day, if not 2 times a day, we pause and we examine, where's God in my day and where am I at in his day? And if we do that over and over and over again, we can actually become people that better notice where God is. And we don't have to go chasing, we don't have to go striving, we don't have to fight for it. But we can simply receive the work that God is doing in us and around us. So we're going to pause here for a moment, and my spiritual director Rachel Connor, through a video recording, is going to lead us through the daily examine. So you're going to try this on right now, and then I'm going to give you just 2 minutes afterwards to talk with the person next to you. And then there's a couple resources on your way out that I'll explain. But what I want you to do in this moment is do your best to press in. If you've been ignoring me this whole time, that's okay. Pay attention to this. And just be present to what she wants to walk. She has been a gift. I had a whole video recording me chatting with her, and it was going to take up too much time, but she monthly meets with me, and we create an hour space where she asks me questions to explore where God is at in my life. And over a 1.5-year time frame, I can see God more clearly than I ever have, yet I still want to see him more clearly. And it's not because some big revelations, it's because I become better at just trying to notice where he's at. It's actually become easier by doing less. It's bizarre. So counterintuitive. In America, do more and you gain more. And this, do less. You might actually find God more. So let's pause, let's play that video, and we'll press in.
Hi, my name is Rachel Connor, and I'd like to take some time with you to introduce to some and encourage others in praying the Examen. The Examen is a prayer practice from the Ignatian exercises that provides a way of noticing where God shows up in your day. It is a practice that invites us to pay attention to what we might otherwise miss in the busyness of just doing life. The goal is to be aware of the many ways and times God's Spirit is graciously present with us. It may be in a conversation, an activity, in the beauty of creation, or simply washing dishes. The spiritual practice of Examen slows us down enough to recognize God's presence, to identify what was life-giving and what was not life-giving in our day. God's internal movement is present in the repeating activities of our goings and our comings. We learn to listen deeply to the data in our lives. What's our mental and emotional state? And how our bodies respond to what's going on around us. Praying the Examen helps us notice how we may experience everything. Could be insomnia, anxiety, difficult interactions with others, even how a headache can take its place as a possible way to lean into God more deeply. Once these things are known, they become part of our ongoing interactions with God in prayer. Would you like to practice? I was hoping you'd say yes. If you're uncomfortable with exploring the Examen, feel free to just sit and welcome the presence of Father, Son, and Spirit. Now, if you're comfortable, let's just pause to be still. Close your eyes. Feet flat on the floor. And take 3 deep breaths. In through your nose, feeling the coolness of the air as you inhale. Hold a moment, then out through your mouth, making the exhale a little longer than the inhale. So go ahead, try it a couple more times. Now return your breathing to normal and turn your attention to the gift of being present with God. Take a few moments now to reflect on the last 24 hours. Imagine yourself in the presence of Trinity, thanking Father, Son, and Spirit for the day and their presence in your day. Ask for the grace to see the day as God sees it. Watch the day as a flow of scenes, just like a movie or a slideshow. Allow Jesus to interrupt the flow and focus on whatever surfaces as something to pay attention to. Here are some of the questions you might ask. When were you most aware of God's presence? And simply thank Him for that awareness. Where were you least aware of God's presence? What got in the way? You might want to express sorrow for not noticing or having a lack of awareness. Where may God have seemed absent, but present maybe in a way you did not recognize? When did you receive and give the most love in your day? When did you give and receive the least love in your day? Where in the day were you aware of living out the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Where was there an absence of the fruit of the Spirit? Now spend a few moments in gratitude for the gifts and blessings of the day. Notice where there was consolation and what events, people, or places that led to desolation. Keep in mind that consolation is when something is deeply and genuinely good for us, good for our souls, leads us towards God and away from our selfish preoccupations. It is a spiritual consolation. Desolation, on the other hand, is when something is not good for us, when we are wrapped up in ourselves and careless of God's gifts and grace working in us, when we substitute other things in place of God. Ask for forgiveness for the times in your day when you have acted, spoken, or thought contrary to God's Spirit and His grace and His calling for you. Now look to tomorrow. Decide now what is your behavior or attitude that you will try to improve. You may end with the prayer that Jesus taught His disciples to pray, or you can sing a song that you like.
So now just for 1 minute, would ask you, I have a few questions up here on the screen. You're not going to get to all of them, but maybe just with someone next to you. Just real quick, how was that experience for you? Without the explanation, that was about 5.5 minutes. So for 1 minute, just at least process something out loud with someone next to you. Go ahead and wrap up that thought. So hopefully that'll give you some more to reflect on and keep chatting through beyond this space. I just want to point us to 2 resources on our way out. We're not done yet. Rob's going to move us into communion and a song, and then we're done. That was about 5 minutes total without the explanation. And I think the question is, do you have 5 minutes in your day to shift your dependence to God? Sometimes that looks like waking up in the morning and saying, just God, this day is yours, may you help me. That's a way of shifting dependence. Maybe it's when you enter into work, maybe it's when you return back home after work. There's these little moments that are in rhythms in our day, and what I would encourage you is to take these cards that are on the stairwell, if you don't have one yet. It's the Daily Examine. There's a number of different ways you can go about this, but it's about a 5-part rhythm we just did. As you can see, it can be done in 5 minutes. It could be done in an hour. But you could laminate this and hang it in your shower. You could put it on your bathroom mirror. You can keep it by your nightstand. You can take a picture of it, and right before you go to social media, you don't do that during the day, but you could just use that as a marker. Here's the rhythms I already have in my day. What does it look like to pause and work through these rhythms to become people who notice where God's at, to be able to depend more on Him? And as you noticed, what can tend to happen is you now start to look at your day tomorrow a lot differently. And you actually start praying through and thinking through, where are you going to be? Who are you going to be with? How do you want to show up? God, where are you at in that? And I believe what happens over time is you and I change more and more and more being dependent on God in these rhythms. So I'd encourage you to do that. And then lastly, I have a list that we've curated of spiritual directors. These are people who are friends of Midtown in some way, shape, or form. I do not get paid to offer them to you. This is not an advertisement, but I do think that you should consider having a spiritual director in your life. Someone to journey with you, someone to ask you questions. You do it with a therapist, you do it with a coach. A spiritual director is another person who wants to journey with you and helping you notice God more in your life. Okay? So those are both on the stairwell on the way out. Why don't we stand and Rob will take us into communion and reflection, and we'll close out.